from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing on WCPT 20, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Welcome to The Gailey Show, the only daily LGBTQ radio news and talk show in the United States. I'm your host, John Parker, in studio with my executive producer, Jim Pounds.
Hey, all.
We are also streaming on our YouTube channel right now. If you like what we're doing, subscribe, click that like button, and leave us a comment. All right, there's a lot happening. There's so much happening in the news today. And we've got the best in progressive news coming up with Richard Chu on WCPT 820, Chu's Views. And in Minneapolis, we've got the Matt McNeil Show on AM 950 Radio coming up here. But this is the episode once a week where we take a time out from the news and we have an expert guest join us to unpack thorny issues, either directly or indirectly facing the LGBTQ community. Today, here's what our guest is going to unpack for us. Democracy, winning Wisconsin, fighting the Old Boys Network, and beer. So my guest is Kirk Bangstad. Kirk is the founder of Minocqua Brewing Company, which is also widely known as the Progressive Beer Company. For instance, these two particular flavors sold out before they were even made. The Biden beer, inoffensive and not bitter, and the Inauguration Day beer, which is labeled a peaceful transition of flavor. On the Minocqua Brewing Company Times Substack, Kirk features regular columns and news from progressive thinkers, and every week conducts a live broadcast from the tap room of the Up North podcast, featuring a variety of guests and regular co-hosts, such as Driving at Home's Patty Vasquez, also here in the evenings here on AM 950. We love her. In addition, as if this weren't enough, Kirk has a super PAC, which he calls Dark Money Meant for Good. Mr. Bangstad, welcome to The Gailey Show.
Really good to be on your show, guys, and I'm glad to meet you. And I actually hope I didn't know you existed until you reached out to me, and so I'm glad I know now, and hopefully we can do some more stuff together down the road.
Oh, absolutely. No, yeah, we're still in our first year, so we're just getting a lay of the progressive land right now, particularly being like the only one in the United States.
Well said.
How do we do this? What is the right way of doing this? We don't know. But that leads me to my first question, because there's a lot of areas to start. I think your Substack, Minocqua Brewing Company Times, is a great place to start because you're creating a platform for independent and progressive writers, as well as the weekly live broadcast Up North podcast. Unpack for me, how does a brewing company get to being a player in the independent progressive news space?
Yeah, it's really big. So it all started when Mark Zuckerberg started throttling my Facebook page. So the Minocqua Brewing Company, we're very politically progressive. We are active in politics in Wisconsin. I put beer out on grocery store shelves that are like mini billboards to try to get people who aren't just listening to progressive talk radio, who might be, right-leaning, like in their liquor stores, to kind of see the messages that I'm making. There's a lot of conservatives who drink beer. So, that's where I was. And I write a lot of, on Sundays in particular on my Facebook page, I started writing like an essay every Sunday that kind of took a lay of the land of what Wisconsin needed to do to stay blue and protect our democracy. And so I started doing that, and it got a lot of views. And lo and behold, in the month before the Harris-Walz, the presidential election, I went from getting 30 to 60,000 views from almost everything I posted to like 500 views. And so, and like 50 likes as opposed to like normal, like the 2,000 to 4,000 likes. So I'm like, something's happening here, and it's not good. And I've heard from other progressive organizations that they were throttled as well. Potentially conservative organizations were throttled. I'm not sure, but we couldn't be as politically active as we wanted to be because my main megaphone had been largely turned off. So the other way that I reach people is every time you by, and I've been boycotted, by, the Minnesota distributors, the Wisconsin distributors, and the Illinois distributors, because I'm so politically out with my messaging. So I've largely turned to selling other stuff as well, like T-shirts. So every time you buy a T-shirt from me, or coffee, we have Woke Coffee. It's pretty light. It ships really easily. The shipping isn't too hard. So every time you buy that stuff from me, I get your email address. So I've collected about 300,000 email addresses over the past 5 years. And so my email list was steadily growing. So when Facebook was taken away from me, I resorted to, I was like, okay, well, all I've got are these emails, and I was paying $30,000 a month to MailChimp just to be able to speak with my audience. Or not a month, sorry, a year. $30,000 a year just to be able to send emails out to 300,000 people who bought T-shirts from me. I get it, you got to pay for a service, but that's a lot. And we discovered that if I just uploaded all those emails to Facebook or to Substack, it's free. It's so we uploaded and that's where all the progressive conversation is currently happening. I mean, you've got Jim Acosta, who left CNN or was fired from CNN, who's now a top guy on Substack. We've been listening to Heather Cox Richardson for years, and she's the one who, I didn't know Substack existed until I started reading hers. And then you got the Midas Network, and and these guys they beat Joe Rogan, and their podcast beat Joe Rogan, and they're largely platforming off of Substack. So I was like, okay, well, that's where the conversation's going. Let's move our email list to Substack. And by the way, like, I can't sell my stuff anymore. So let's get some of the smartest people I know to write when I'm not writing, so that nobody wants to hear from me 5 times a week, but I still got to sell my stuff 5 times a week through some channels. So let's pay really smart people to talk about politics, and talk about democracy in the Midwest. It's Midwest centric, but let's pay them, and then let's have Kirk do a little, by the way, can you buy some coffee after you read this really smart article, and that, by the way, that's not new. Like, the New York Times didn't start off being the New York Times. It started off being a circular for a grocery store somewhere in Manhattan. Right. Like, they needed to sell, some turnips. And so, they were like, well, how do we best sell these turnips? Well, let's actually have somebody who's smart write an article, next to this little circular that we hand out, so that we can sell turnips. So this is not new, but it's kind of going past. It's kind of going back to a long time in the past when media is now largely dying, and so you got to fund it somehow. And so I'm funding it through product sales. And so we've made number 5. Weirdly, I have no idea why. I know why. It's because the algorithm measures, subscribers, and we're just throwing emails at them. But we were number 5 out of, in America on U.S. Substack political pages just last week.
Wow.
Tom Hartman agreed to be on our podcast because we beat him a few times on Substack. And Tom Hartman's a legend. I wouldn't, he speaks to me so well. He's obviously way better at this than we are, but because of the algorithm, because our email reach, and because we sell stuff and get email addresses, we're in the mix now. And I don't want to fail people. If we're gonna be read a lot, I want to actually move the needle. And so that's why I'm trying to find the smartest people I can to write every day for me.
We're talking with Kirk Bangstad, founder of Minocqua Brewing Company, a progressive beer company that also runs a fantastic Substack we're talking about right now, Progressive Writers, and every week broadcasts a live episode of the Up North podcast from the Minocqua Brewing Company tap room. I really appreciate the Midwest focus, particularly the Wisconsin focus, because Wisconsin, Jim is a resident. We spend, half our weeks there in Northwest Wisconsin by Barron, Luck, Spooner, that area. And swingiest of swing states, I still don't understand how Wisconsin has Tammy Baldwin and Ron Johnson as your senators. There's no ideological like unity in those selections there. Talk to us. I've got just about 2 minutes left before we hit the break, and I want to continue after we hit the break. But tell us where you feel Wisconsin is at and the direction it is going, particularly because you all got new maps for your legislature.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we have Tammy Baldwin and we have Ron Johnson is because A, they're both white, unfortunately, but B, we vote for incumbents because we're not really adventurous people, and we're also very trusting people. So when we see ads, we believe them, even though those ads can be completely skewed. And so we're able to be manipulated because we're trusting and good, and we're also the reason Mandela Barnes didn't beat Ron Johnson simply is because they painted him as a black thug in the last election, and there's 95% of us are white, and too many of us are scared of urban Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And
Well
the maps though seem to be going to fix that. Do you feel in 2026 already there was some progress made last year in 24?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, leave it to Democrats to shoot themselves in the foot, when it really matters, or to cling defeat out of the jaws of victory like they did 2 weeks ago. But yes, if we do everything right, we should be able to get the majority back, or at least I think unseat Robin Vos. So I think we have a better chance in the assembly.
Ooh.
And if we got rid of him, oh my God, Wisconsin would change for the better.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to take a break. We're going to have more with Kirk Bangstad, founder of Minocqua Brewing Company, when we come back. If you like what we're doing here, we have been diving into progressive and democratic socialist politics with Wisconsin State Assemblyman Christian Phelps, Madison City Councilwoman Nina Martinez Rutherford. I can't get over saying her name. I absolutely love that. And on the other side of the river, we've been talking with LGBTQ Minnesota State House Reps Lee Finke and Liz Ryer. You can watch all of this on our YouTube channel. You can keep the conversation going. We've been venturing into blue sky, seeing what the territory is like over there. We are at thegaleyshow.org on Blue Sky. You are listening to The Gailey Show on AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk. More after the break. Welcome back to The Gailey Show. I'm John Parker. We're coming up on the bottom of the hour in studio with my executive producer, Jim Pounds. This is our weekly episode we call Unpack This For Me, where we sit down with an expert guest who joins us to unpack thorny issues that are either directly or indirectly affecting the LGBTQ community and the allied community. Today, my guest is Kirk Bangstad, founder of Minocqua Brewing Company and host of the weekly Up North podcast, founder of an amazing Substack, a collection of amazing progressive writers, and just learning in the past segment, number 5 on Substack for in the U.S., which is amazing. Congratulations, sir.
For one day. Let's regularly in the top 100. Regularly in the top 100, though.
You know what I mean? It's a long-term game here, but every day counts, as we've learned here at the Gailey Show. All right, so there is something that you have been dealing with for a long time now. We've been subscribing to your newsletters for a while, and I have to say, when I watched Making a Murderer a few years ago on Netflix, I thought, no way can Wisconsin's judicial system be this convoluted. And then I started getting your emails of what's happening to you in northern and your company in northern Wisconsin, and every single time my jaw drops at what is happening to you up there. And you've been fighting MAGA and the Old Boys Network up there in a very different way than the rest of us have been. Can you tell us a little bit about this saga that they've been dragging you through?
Yeah, so there's a lot to talk about, but I want to get into theoretical, stuff about like judges in rural areas, because I've largely lost my faith in the judicial system if you live out in the boonies. But initially I ran the largest restaurant brew pub in Minocqua, Wisconsin, which is a beautiful vacation town that gets jammed up with 80,000 people every summer, but then has about 8,000 people that live there year round. So it's very seasonal. And when COVID was raging, I was one of the only restaurant up there that said, guys, we can't be serving people inside right now. It's dangerous. I wasn't the only person in America. Every big city, was along for the ride. But this tourist town was, when Trump said it was okay to think that COVID wasn't real, this tourist town, which is largely conservative, kind of opened wide up. And I went from being a guy that was, lauded for, thinking about the health of stuff, from being a guy who was hurting tourism in the town because I was saying, guys, we can't get people sick. We can't do this. So long story short, we didn't get the second round of PPP financing in Minocqua or, in the country, because Mitch McConnell blocked it from happening, which blocked money from going to every single bar and restaurant, anybody who might be being hurt by COVID. And because we make 80% of our revenues in 3 months, and we are facing a winter of COVID, I decided I had to close up my restaurant and hope for the best and reopen, when COVID was over. So when I did that, I had largely lost my locals anyways, because I was they didn't like me anymore because I cared about COVID. So I put a huge Biden sign on the side of my building, I custom made. And I said, listen, as a brewer, we have to believe in science because we make bad beer unless we believe in science. And so science is also COVID, and our entire federal government is just screwing this up because they're not believing in science, and they're not allowing the scientists to kind of lead the discussion here, and it's all politics. And so I said, that's why we're voting for Biden, and that's why we're supporting Biden, Harris, and all of a sudden, and people, it went crazy. I mean, I got on the front page of the New York Times because of it, because people went bonkers that a business was willing to be so out there in one of the most MAGA areas of Wisconsin. And so we got a lot of news out of it. But what made even more news was within a couple of days, the county, Oneida County, sent me a letter saying they were going to fine me because my sign was too big and it broke county zoning codes. And they were going to fine me every day in 30 days until the election unless I took my sign down. There's 1,000 lakes, right around where I live, and there's these huge Trump signs flowing from, boats. They're in the highway. There's these semis who have been parked in cornfields with huge Trump signs, and it was laughable that somebody was able to get to the county zoning guy, and I know probably among 10 men who were probably willing to do this or had enough clout to do this, to get him to threaten to take my sign down, and it was laughable. And so that started a war that has been, because I didn't take it down. Turns out, Supreme Court case in Arizona, Gilbert versus the town of Gilbert, Reed versus the town of Gilbert, said you can't regulate political signs because that's a First Amendment violation. And so they weren't even allowed to do it with a Supreme Court precedent. And we just embarrassed the hell out of them. In fact, I raised money to pay these fines by selling my T-shirts. And I said, guys, if you want to help me pay whatever these fines are going to be, here's a T-shirt. We sold $100,000 worth of T-shirts in 4 days.
Wow.
So we just we put Minocqua on Minocqua's on the map if you like boating in northern Wisconsin, but we put it on the map nationally many, many times over in the last 5 years because of how ridiculous the town has been to me. And because I can talk about it in a kind of a humorous way, but also show how ridiculous they're being, it kind of gets taken up, it kind of goes viral. Mm-hmm. So that started the war. And so there's two entities that have been really trying to put me out of business. Three, the town of Minocqua even has, the town of Minocqua, which is an unincorporated town, which has no zoning department. But they somehow for over the last 100 years, they're involved in every single zoning decision that exists, but there's no actual laws that connect anything they do with real zoning law or decisions. But somehow they've inserted themselves because they want me out of town. The Oneida County Zoning Board is full of the old boys network who have worked extremely hard. They've tried to zone me out of existence in the funniest ways, but the most heinous ways. And then there's this newspaper publisher who's across the street from our actual tap room, who is his propaganda. Nobody reads the paper unless you want to understand who was arrested for drunk driving. It looks like we're about ready to cut to a commercial. I can tell the rest of the story in a little bit.
Yeah. After the break here, we're talking with Kirk Bangstead, founder of Minocqua Brewing Company, a progressive brew company that also runs a fantastic Substack of progressive writers, and every week broadcasts a live episode of the Up North podcast from the Minocqua Brewing Company tap room. We're going to take a break. None of this is possible without listener support. Trust me when I say the Trump administration is coming for public radio and independent radio. Please consider becoming a member of AM 950. You can go to am950radio.com. Select Become a Member, and we've got a special gift for you, a 2026 calendar by Matt McNeil himself. You're listening to The Gailey Show. More after this break. Coming to you from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Welcome back to The Gailey Show. I'm John Parker. It is 33 minutes after the hour. Also streaming on our YouTube channel. If you like what we're doing, subscribe, click that like button, and leave us a comment. In the studio with me today is my executive producer, Jim Pounds. It is our weekly episode called Unpack This For Me. We bring an expert guest in to unpack thorny issues that either directly or indirectly affect the LGBTQ and allied community. My guest today is Kirk Bangstead, who is the founder of Minocqua Brewing Company, the progressive brew company. Through the Minocqua Brewing Times Substack, Kirk features regular columns and news from progressive thinkers, and every week conducts a live broadcast from the tap room of the Up North podcast. Kirk, before the break, you were setting the stage for this legal saga that started because you had the audacity to put up a Biden banner on your business. And then the zoning, well, I mean, I guess it's not a zoning commission. There isn't a zoning commission, as you're telling us. And then the newspaper editor, they're all getting in on it. I mean, now you're setting the stage for this old boys network that's just coming after you.
Yeah. So there's two strains, and I'm gonna try not get too detailed. It's been 5 years of legal battles, but the first strain I told you before the break is both the town of Minocqua and the Oneida County zoning board, both of the old boys network. But the other strain is this a publisher of the Lakeland Times, and this guy inherited his paper from his dad. I don't think has ever left this town of 8,000 people, but he's wealthy beyond imagination because he's a major landowner in this very lake-rich county in Wisconsin. And so he owns this paper and has used it as his own plaything to if he doesn't like somebody in town, he can get him out. He's gotten superintendents fired or run out of town. And he's very, very right wing. I mean, everything coming out of the Heritage Foundation is basically lifted word for word and pasted on. He's called for the FBI to be abolished when they were coming after Trump. On his paper, with side by side with pictures of the high school basketball team and lauding like little Johnny, for doing doing a really good, scoring a lot of points. So it's like the town wants to pick up the paper because they want to read about little Johnny, and then they have to deal with this crazy stuff, that he prints. So I had the audacity when he went after our female. It's always a woman. It's always a woman in power. He went after our county health official who had the audacity to tell people, because it was just her. She didn't have any helpers. It was just her. She tell people if somebody got sick and they were spending time at a bar or a restaurant, and they got COVID, here's where they were for 4 hours. if you were there too, you should probably go get tested because chances are you were exposed. Perfectly fine. He wrote an article that railed against her, called her the Joseph McCarthy of COVID or something like that. And I had the audacity to write a letter back because at that point I had about 50,000 Facebook followers and he's got about 8,000 newspaper subscribers. So if anybody wants me to fight on their behalf on the left, like it's got to be me, and I can clobber him. And now I can clobber him. And so I wrote this long piece and I called him a crook, a liar, and a misogynist. And he sued me for defamation. Obviously, imagine a newspaper who only exists, or radio station, they only exist because they're protected by the First Amendment, to sue because they don't like what somebody said about them for defamation. So that started a saga. I was sued for defamation, and I lost the largest defamation lawsuit in the history of the state of Wisconsin, $750,000. And this case should have been dismissed from within a week of it being filed by Judge Leon Stentz, who is the judge in Forest County, Wisconsin, which is the second smallest county in Wisconsin, next to Florence County, which is the smallest county in Wisconsin. These two counties have nobody living in it. They have one judge for both counties, and this guy is apparently he owes alimony to 3 or 4 different women, and he can't retire. Because he should have retired. He's about as red as it gets, and he can't retire because he needs to make money. So he's this judge, and he knows nothing about defamation, but he allowed this case to go on. And as soon as you say this case can't be allowed to go on, that's an immediate $300,000 of discovery. So this guy sued me, and while I'm getting zoned out of existence, and so I have to fight back legally to sue my county for trying to zone me. I also have to raise money. I've had to raise money. Thank God I have a large audience, or else I'd be done by now. But I've raised money with my audience to also fight back against this defamation stuff. Not only did I lose in defamation, but the next thing that's really funny that happened. So much of this is funny because I get to use my writing skills to really lean into these guys. But the thing that happened next was yet again, Greg Walker goes after this 3rd grade teacher for teaching a book that included same-sex marriage. This book had been it had been given awards. It's in the curricula all over the country. It's not like it's any out there or anything. And he said, he said this 3rd grade teacher's a groomer. They also went after the principal, who was another woman in power. How could you dare let this teacher do this? And and they couldn't fight back. He buys ink by the barrel. These are teachers and principals at a local school, and so somehow I get wind of it. I'm like, okay, here we go. So I Photoshop. So I get my graphic designer to find a photo of a sadomasochistic scene, and I Photoshopped the general manager of the Lakeland Times, who's a woman, in this leather vinyl suit, spanking this submissive guy, and I photoshopped Greg Walker's face in the submissive guys. Like they're both in like leather gimpy suits, and so I put a little like text box, and for her text box it says, "Boss, are you sure that the reason you go after teachers for talking about same-sex marriage are you reason you go after them is because you're not ashamed of your own sexual deviances?" and then in his text box below, he's like, "If you want your end of the month bonus, you'll shut up and keep spanking." So I put that out there, as our way to ridicule a guy who's stuck in the Stone Ages, and doing it through satire and parody. And I said in that post, I've got 138,000 Facebook followers now, and this is pre-Substack. I said in that post, just like the Lakeland Times and Fox News, none of this is fact. It's for entertainment purposes only. So I even gave myself a disclaimer.
Yeah.
Then the next time, and I'm living both in Madison in the wintertime, and I'm living in Minocqua in the summertime. So I'm in Madison, but I'm coming back up to Minocqua just to deal with the tap room up there. For 24 hours, I'm there. On my way out of town, I am arrested, and I am thrown in jail for criminal defamation. And because of that thing that I posted that was completely satire. Now, criminal defamation shouldn't even be a law. In 1964, after the Times versus Sullivan case, which said that defamation has to hit certain levels of, especially if you're a public figure, if you buy ink by the barrel, it's almost impossible to win, a defamation case, which Greg Walker had already won because we had a terrible judge. This other case is now butting up against Garrison versus Louisiana, which was this guy who criticized the Attorney General of Louisiana, and they threw him in jail because of it. And it went all the way to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was like, you can't do that. If you want to settle a defamation case, it's got to be with money, because you're only dealing with people's reputations. You can't throw somebody in jail for defamation. You just can't. Right. So that should have been settled, but somehow Wisconsin state statute, because we're somewhat backwards, still has criminal defamation on the statute books. So it's only been used 100 times in the last 50 years, and it's only ever used in small towns, because any real district attorney who's gone to any real law school is going to know that this is crazy, and so Greg Walker was able to convince the sheriff and the district attorney of Oneida County to arrest me for criminal defamation. And so they threw me in jail. That's ridiculous. And then because of that, I had a bail set on me because this had to go through the system. It was since dismissed, but and that was a year ago. A year later, last July, I'm giving a political speech in my beer garden across the street from the Lakeland Times. All of a sudden, Greg Walker leaves his office, and I'm talking about corruption. And so I go point at him to my audience, and I'm like, speaking of corruption, this is the ringleader of the entire thing. He picks up his phone, calls the same sheriff that he called to haul me in jail before. There are no fewer than 4 police jurisdictions, about 20 police cars that encircle the tap room. They arrest 6 of my customers, and they arrest me for, get this, felony witness intimidation. Felony, because I was still under bond from the previous criminal defamation. So Greg's a witness to me in this previous crime. That's not a crime. But they're able to pin that on me. And they also arrested me for bail jumping because I'm still part of this false criminal thing from a year before. So while everybody else gets out within 3 hours for a disorderly conduct charge, which they should have never had, I'm in there until a judge, because I got a felony now against me. So I'm in there until a judge looked at this and it's like, this is ridiculous, and let me out. But that's another 24 hours in jail. I've been in jail more than anybody that I know right now. After, maybe I haven't got out enough, but so now I've been in jail twice. We have beaten both of those charges, and I've just railed on this guy. I mean, I can't imagine. I'm winning the court of public opinion. I'm winning in the legal battles. And then the second strain, and this is the end of my story, is just last week or 2 weeks ago. We have been fighting in federal court for First Amendment violations. We've been fighting in circuit courts in Oneida County. Finally, my lawyer, Fred Melms, who I put on a beer can because he's helped me out so much. I put his face on a beer can. It's called, he's got red hair. So I called it the Grateful Fred Red Ale. And it has this Grateful Dead theme. But Fred got me, Fred forced this county board of adjustment, which it's a pseudo public board that's not elected, but they kind of are around to make sure that zoning board decisions aren't crazy. So there's a second cover. So he made them show up to my beer garden. He made the county zoning guy go through all the zoning codes that we had perfectly like met to a T, so that when they went back, they couldn't just vote against me without knowing they were going to break state laws that said if you passed all the zoning stuff, you have to give them, their permits to do business. Mm-hmm. So we finally, the zoning, the oversight committee gave us our business permit back after this 5-year struggle, and no less, there's at least $1 million that had been spent in legal fees just to stay alive in my business. But we finally got our business permit back, and I think we won the war, because I don't think there's anything else they can do to us now. So we're largely done with the battles, but it's been quite something. In the last 5 years.
That is a saga. That's
a book.
Seriously, it's a nonfiction book. It's a novelization. There's a limited series for HBO Max in there. I have to take one more break. We're going to have more with Kirk Bangstad, founder of Minocqua Brewing Company, a progressive beer company that also runs a fantastic Substack of progressive writers, and every week broadcasts a live episode of the Up North podcast from their tap room. You are listening to The Gailey Show on AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk. See you on the flip side of this break. Welcome back to The Gailey Show. I'm John Parker. We are coming up on the top of the hour. Our guest today is Kirk Bangstad, founder of Minocqua Brewing Company and host of the weekly Up North podcast. Jim, as a resident of Wisconsin, I know you've got a bunch of questions for Kirk.
I'm about 2.5 hours west of you. I'm in Baronet, I guess, close is the closest city. And I don't know how I came across your writing. For some reason, I got one of your e-newsletters or something. And so I was in the middle of your story that was happening and didn't know what had preceded it. I've now kept somewhere close to 100 e-newsletters and other messages from Minocqua Brewing. And I'm trying to go back and sort of parse through them and really learn this in detail. So I know that story has a lot more detail. But here's my question. You ran for assembly, which is something I used to fantasize about doing, and you actually did it. And then you have a style about you that is so unaffected, so authentic and not forced and not studied and not rehearsed. You are authentically who you are. And I'm wondering if you've always been comfortable speaking your mind. One of the things I love that you do in your writing is you name people by name, and most media avoids that. They talk about the Democrats, or they talk about the liberals, or they talk about some term, and they don't pin it on somebody, and you do. And I love that about you. How did you come to that style?
Well, so in short, it's because I lost my wife, and that changed my life dramatically. But the long way is I moved back to Wisconsin when my wife was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and we were living in New York City, and I had recently was moving. I was a professional opera singer, but I also made money on this. My side hustle was being a management consultant for like Google, Facebook, and Oracle. But I never liked that, and I knew it was getting too old to make it as an opera singer. So I was like, the only other thing I like in life is, passionate about is politics. So I was on Anthony Weiner's. I was like Anthony Weiner's speechwriter, who's a guy running for mayor in New York City. Brilliant guy, great politician, great fighter. Just had a problem, with exposing himself to women, and that's kind of the downfall of Anthony Weiner. We can get into how that was the downfall of Hillary Clinton as well, but that's for another story. So my wife got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer at the time, and we decided to move to Wisconsin after traveling quite a bit. She was getting better, but my family was kind of stronger, and and that my family was still in Wisconsin, and so we vacationed in Minocqua. And long story short, I started getting involved in politics because that's kind of where my life was heading before she got sick. And I was convinced to run for Congress in the 7th district of Wisconsin for like a second, until I realized how right Wisconsin had lurched in that area I'd been gone for 20 years, but I grew up in Stevens Point, which used to be part of the district. So I was convinced to run for Congress, and that was pure hubris. Like there was no reason. You talk about me being authentic now. I was not authentic at all. I was going in front of county Democratic parties and talking about why we should fight the fight. And I was full of it. I didn't know them. I couldn't relate with them. I had been this opera singer in New York City, and so I just didn't belong. I didn't belong at all. And so I wasn't authentic. And then I pulled out of the race when it was obvious we'd have to spend $1 million just not to embarrass ourselves.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, this is not for me. I'm out. But Elizabeth wanted to stay. She had started a spinning studio in this tiny town of Minocqua, stage 4 lung cancer, but she's a great athlete. And all the women in town loved her, because just imagine getting your butt kicked by a cancer patient, every day. It's pretty motivating. Like, you're going to at least work as hard as she's working,
right.
So she loved it. She was surrounded by people who loved her. So she's like, we're staying, Kirk. So we bought the Minocqua Brewing Company because it had a stage and I wanted to sing. That was kind of the reason we bought it. Not really because I'm a brewer. And so long story short, I wasn't in politics, and I focused on running this brewing company until she passed away in 2019. And then COVID put restaurants in the center of politics in 2020. So I was still grieving big time when I also was faced with bankruptcy at the same time because of COVID. So a little part of me just snapped. And I think I also realized that I've had a wonderful life. I mean, I've traveled around the world. I've been healthy. I've sung on big stages, and so it's like, if I died tomorrow, I'd be okay. And so I think I don't need to prove anything to anybody anymore. And so that's why I just started speaking my mind, and it resonated, I think, for exactly the reasons you're saying. Like, I'm going to call it as it is. I have nothing to prove. I'm not running for office. And I have no reason to put my business in jeopardy by alienating all the Republicans and selling beer, but I just do it. And that's, and hopefully I can keep doing it and make enough money to keep doing it. But that's why I exist. That's who I am.
And you demonstrate, like no one has, to my knowledge, what it is to be a small business person dealing with the myth of the Republicans being pro-business and seeing, oh, well, it's not that simple. I mean, there's plenty of times when they will gladly throw a business under the bus because they don't agree with something else about them. And I think you sort of see behind the curtain how little authenticness there is. And the so-called Republicans are good at business. I'm a recovered Republican from 1980 when I voted for John Anderson because I couldn't abide voting for Ronald Reagan. And so I love the fact that you let people see the humanity, or the lack of humanity, which is so different from just talking about issues. So kudos to you for that.
Well, the Substack is Minocqua Brewing Company Times. The podcast is Up North Podcast, which airs from the Minocqua Brewing Company tap room every week. We have links in our show notes and on our website for you to connect with Kirk and Minocqua Brewing Company. We have tasted the coffee. The coffee is very good. And we also, a big fan that you have a Pride beer every June. But Kirk, we'll have to have you back because I know we just got to the tip of the iceberg here. But thank you for joining us today.
Thanks a lot. Great to be on your show, guys. Take care.
All right. Up next on WCPT 820 is Chew's Views with Richard Chew on AM 950 Radio. It's the Matt McNeil Show. Stay tuned after that for Native Roots Radio. And then at 10 p.m. Central, Step Into the Unknown with Greg Bakken on Ghostbox Radio. And until this time tomorrow, keep it queer, America.
Keep it queer.